Welcome to Lamora's Cards and Horrors, the best store for all your gaming and haunting needs. I'm Matthew, and today we're doing another episode of Creatures in Graveyards, where I'm bringing in guests to talk about their favorite cards and their favorite horrors. Today I've got Trenton with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Trenton. I go by Trentyn907 on Twitter, where you can find me just like screaming into the void about EDH and things I love, but more loudly about things I don't love about the format. I also make proxies. I engage in the proxy discourse. So if you're anti-proxy, I'm sorry, but I'm probably one of the people telling you to just let
Yeah,
people
this is a
proxy.
very pro proxy channel, so
Yeah.
keep that in mind if you're going to keep watching here.
Yeah.
You said you wanted
Yeah.
to do your movie first. Which
Yeah.
movie did you pick?
So we're gonna talk about probably one of the first horror movies that I remember watching. By today's standards, it's probably not considered a horror movie, but it's a horror movie that I remember watching and not having nightmares about. So
Okay.
we're gonna talk about 1979's Alien, the original Alien movie.
Yes. Very
So
iconic movie.
yeah. I'm a really big sci-fi buff,
Mm,
so I can gush about most of the Alien series.
yeah.
Obviously, 3 and Resurrection are a little questionable, but like they're fine for what they are. Yeah, as far as the original Alien goes, just the atmosphere, the
Mhm.
score, everything is very dark. And obviously, we're talking about the late 70s here, so everything was or almost no CGI, if any at all. It's all pretty
Yeah,
much
I
done
don't.
animatronic and
Yeah, I don't believe there is any.
yeah. So it's and every year my girlfriend and I we rewatch the Alien quadrilogy, and
Hmm.
it's like a little ritual, and that movie still holds up to this day.
Hmm.
It's
For
just so
sure.
cool, and I love the way they did the xenomorph. I could probably gush about Aliens a little bit more
Yeah.
than Alien, but as far as horror movies go,
Hmm.
I think Alien is more horror, and
Yeah.
Aliens is definitely just more sci-fi action.
Yeah. Yeah. The big thing that always stands out to me when rewatching Alien is how absolutely gorgeous the sets are and
Yep.
all the effects. Like, it looks better than most movies that come out today because of how devoted they were to making this movie just look real. Like, everything feels real.
Yep.
The ship feels like a real lived in place, and the technology is the sort of, analog futurist things that you'd see a lot more in, like, pre 80s or pre 90s idea of the future.
Yep.
And it has such a unique feel to it, and it's easy to just like live in it when you watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's so well done, and I
Mhm.
don't obviously so I wasn't alive back in
Yeah,
'79.
same.
My parents would have been, but they would have been 10 years
Hmm.
old, 12 years old at the time, kind of thing. Um, but man, just yeah, like you said, everything aesthetically looks very, especially for 40 years ago, how you would have probably envisioned what the future would look like,
Hmm.
and digital technology was still very, very new at that time. So the fact that they were able to incorporate some things that look digital but still look like accurate, or how they
Hmm.
would, or how they do even to this day, is really cool and really well done. Um, Obviously the scenes with the xenomorph are probably, like, I think one of my favorite scenes, hands down, in that movie is I think it's Brett is yeah, I think it's Brett is wandering around. It's right after the xenomorph is on the ship, and it
Hmm.
ends up hiding in like the cooling ducts.
Yeah.
I think it's Brett is the character that's like wandering around. He scares the cat. So he scares Jonesy and he goes looking for it. And I remember there's a scene. So Brett's like in the cooling tower area, and he ends up like looking up, and like the water, condensation's running
Hmm.
down, and he's kind of like washing his face. But if you look, you can see the xenomorph just slowly swinging and like kind of hanging out. And I just remember like the first few times I watched the movie, just never thought anything of it
Hmm.
until I got a little older and like started paying more attention. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, he doesn't know, he
Hmm.
doesn't know. And yeah, then he gets got. But
Yep.
yeah, that scene just forever is just so cool to me. Like it looks like it's just, something that's swinging on a chain that should naturally be there. And like it's only if you really pay attention to like the shape and some of the oddities that the xenomorph has,
Hmm.
physically, that you catch it. But that scene, and of course the chest burster scene,
Yeah.
like what an iconic scene. And I love the little like trivia. Apparently, no one was told that was gonna happen except for the actor, and now I'm forgetting his name, who's getting burst out of their
Yeah,
chest,
that's what I've heard.
yeah.
It-
So he was apparently him and was it Spielberg that directed that movie?
Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott, yeah. So him and Scott were the only people that knew, and who really knew that that was going to happen. And so and there was a reason, and I guess Scott wanted to portray like legitimacy. Like he
Hmm.
wanted everyone to, like, he wanted to capture the natural like shock and horror that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think they did extremely well. Everyone gets blood splattered on their
Hmm.
face, and everyone's shocked, and here's this cute little like and then
It's
it skitters off. And
really unique for the movie because it's like sort of the first big scare, I guess. You get some when they first go onto the ship, but
yep.
and it's also like the only one that is like everything is happening in like the pure light, where it's just like everything is completely illuminated, everybody's there, there's no mystery, and it's just like this super sudden violence, and then it's just like the whole rest of the movie from now on you don't fully see the alien for a lot of the rest of the movie. It sort of like slinks around. A lot of the violence is even off screen, but you get like
Yeah.
when it first kicks off, it's just this sudden just boom that hits right in the middle of the light. Nobody knows what's happening, and then the whole movie changes from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's all downhill from there,
Yes.
and I love it because it's got this almost like an escape room kind of
Mm.
feel. No one knows what's lurking around the next corner. Obviously the eventually Dallas goes into the air ducts, and everyone's trying to like walk him through the air ducts and make
Mm.
sure that he's good. And then there's the little like grabby scene in
Yeah.
the air duct, and that's really like just the whole movie, for being 43 years old now, just I would hold it to any given horror movie
Mm.
of today and just be like, but is it? And obviously I'm gonna date myself a little bit here. I'm a 90s kid, so
Mm.
like I grew up in an era of like I still appreciate the shit out of the Star Wars prequels,
Yeah.
like I don't care what anybody says. I was a child when episodes 1, 2, and 3 came
Yeah.
out. Those movies are bangers. I don't care.
Mm.
Um, so like I have this, and maybe it's more nostalgia talking than anything, but I have such an appreciation for the first Alien film that I would happily hold it up to any modern horror film and be like, nope, that doesn't hold a candle to Alien. Doesn't hold a
Yeah.
candle
I
to
think
Alien.
I think a lot of it is like Alien being like a big sci-fi movie, I guess at the time kind of helped. Where it's like most horror movies now that come out, they aren't the big release, of the summer,
Sure.
things like that. But like, I mean, also they get to work with technology that's way beyond what they had in 79, 78 when they were making the movie.
Yeah.
And I will at the very least visually, I think, we've come a long way with storytelling, which I think the characterization and the script and the dialogue is actually really solid in Alien. That's also another thing that's really strong about the movie.
Yeah.
Um, but the visuals and just the like the wholeness of the movie, like every part of it just oozes Alien. You see like a single still from the movie and you're like, yep, that's Alien. Like every part of it
Yeah.
feels like Alien.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, that movie, and it just pioneered so much
Mhm.
to follow it, and it set this. I think it set this really cool precedent for what sci-fi and sci-fi horror could be,
Yeah.
and you know what it should be to some degree. Because
Mhm.
I mean, you know, I talked to my brother, but I have an older brother. One of his favorite movies of all time is Jurassic Park, and
Yeah.
of course, me being a young '90s kid, I agree
Mhm.
wholeheartedly. Jurassic Park's a great film. Uh, we we go back and forth on we both absolutely love the first one.
Mhm.
I don't like the second one as much.
Yeah.
I do remember liking the third one for as much crap as it gets. But we were talking about it, and the reason I think that the first one grabs onto us so much is the use of practical effects instead of digital or like edited effects. So you have an animatronic T-Rex and Velociraptor
Mhm.
that were physically built. Like they're not just added in post. They're not
Yeah.
green screened in. They're not. So you get a sense of actual legitimacy when you watch Alien versus when you watch like Covenant, for
Mhm.
example, or Prometheus or anything along those lines, which
Yeah.
still look really good. The xenomorphs, especially the one post credits in Prometheus, looks freaking cool. Like just
Mhm.
gnarly. Looks great, but it just doesn't quite have that same feel. And I
Yeah.
think the use of practical effects for, pretty much all of film's history up until the recent 15, 20 years really kind of helps set this bar of what is and what could and should be.
Yeah.
And, the digital age, obviously, no one's out there building animatronic T-Rexes anymore because
Mhm.
that's probably very labor
Yes.
intensive,
Yeah.
very money intensive,
That's a lot. A lot of
it
it's not like these companies don't want to do it, especially like smaller movies that are being made. It's not like they don't know that practical effects are probably going to make a better product. It's just incredibly time and money consuming.
Yep. Yeah, and arguably, someone who, digital artists and graphic, people who are good at being able to design a
Mhm.
3D model are probably going to do just as good of a job, rendering it digitally. But practical effects just they have that realness. They have that lived in feel that, like
Mhm.
when a set is a green screen set, it doesn't I don't know, it just doesn't quite have the same feel,
Yeah.
like
When.
so you do get this. I mean, and I talk all the very first Star Wars movies, 4, 5, and 6. I mean,
Mhm.
I was recently just kind of diving deep because I'm a Star Wars fan, and I didn't realize that some of the scenes are like paintings that someone painted, and they were just still paintings, and then they have this like a model ship that
Yeah.
comes in and like flies past it kind of thing. Like I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
That was news to me. I was just like, holy crap, like that's just a painting. That's just a
Yeah.
painting,
They
like
do it before CGI. You had a lot more like restrictions imposed on what you could do, and so people got incredibly creative. Where you see that innate, like you'll see things, they look massive, but they're just done in a way that implies scale, even though you're really looking at a model. It's like this big,
yeah,
like in
yeah,
Alien. Like no, they didn't build the ships. They're not full size,
right.
but
Yeah.
they're able to
Yeah, no, they're
capture that
just
feeling.
yeah. Yeah, and the Sulaco is, it's just a model ship
Yeah.
basically that is on a stick, and they're just transporting it in front of either a
Hmm.
painting or actually, yeah, it probably was a painting for that one too. So it was just really neat because, that's something obviously at the time when I was younger I didn't really think about. And then you go back and you start watching all these films that, you grew up with, and you're like, wow, that still looks so good. It's because that is a physical
Yeah. It
representation
can't
that
really
is
be
actually
dated.
there. Yeah, exactly.
Like effects are very easily dated, I guess. And I
Yeah.
think one thing that helps, because you brought up the Star Wars comparison, which I always compare. I look at Alien and try to compare it to movies around the same time, and like I think Alien dunks all over Star Wars. the original trilogy, because it looks just like everything. Like there are things that look great about, so like you look at it in the original trilogy versus now, and you look at like what the X-wing cockpit looks like, and it has that same sort of like visceral thing where you just see it and you just like, I can imagine sitting in these buttons working, stuff like
Yep.
that. But I think one thing that helps Alien is its sort of its premise, where unlike a lot of sci-fi things like every Star Wars movie or Star Trek or whatever, there's not really any traveling through space. It's just they're in space. They're in this very enclosed thing, so they're able to focus on like making the Nostromo look like immaculate. Like the detail can be really honed in, and they're able
Right.
to just make it feel great throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas like, like a Star Wars does look good, but they had to make Tatooine look good. They had to make Yavin look good. They had to make the Death Star look good. They had to do all this. Where Alien's just like, we got you in one place. We're gonna make that one
Yep.
place perfect.
Yep. Yeah, and realistically, I mean, they did a good job. I mean, it's a very large ship, and they're able to give it that feel because, I mean, when you watch the movie, it takes you through all of these various areas,
Hmm.
throughout the ship, the cooling ducts, and or cooling tower, the cooling station, just everything is really, it's just really well done. Like
Yeah.
I suck at putting things into words for the most part. Like my vocabulary is not like super great, but it's just such a well done movie. It is aged extremely well. It still
Hmm.
holds up extremely well. It's very hard to compare it to any kind of like modern sci-fi horror because it's almost to some degree the OG. It's
Yeah.
really hard to try and compare anything new to the original and be like, oh well, there's this, and like there's always going to be something,
Hmm.
especially as technology improves and things look better and better and better, that you can be like, well, I mean, Alien 10 years from now probably doesn't look as good, but I highly doubt that's ever going to be the
Yeah.
case or an argument. It's always going to look as good as it does. I remember watching the the VHS version of A New Hope, and
Hmm.
there's the scene where Obi-Wan is fighting Vader, and the lightsabers get held at this awkward angle where all you see is this tiny dot of blue light.
Hmm.
There's no saber, it's just this tiny dot of blue light. It's like for a split second, all you see is Obi-Wan's holding the saber like this, and all you see is this little, like, it's like basically like a flashlight with a blue
Hmm.
piece of plastic over it. And it's got this like awkward, like it lost, they didn't, maybe they were just like, oh well, it's only there for a second, like
Hmm.
imagine you're staring right down the barrel of the lightsaber, you're only going to see X amount of it anyway, but it just looks awkward. Whereas
Yeah.
everything about Alien, there's nothing that ever really looks awkward.
Hmm. Which I think, you could, like, we talked about this part of the movie a lot, but I think it especially is important in horror, because when your audience gets pulled out of the movie by something, everything else like loses its value immediately. Like
Yeah.
if you're watching a horror movie and you're not like emotionally invested in it, or just and able to just like completely be immersed, then it makes everything the movie tries to do so much weaker. And it's like the biggest strength of that movie, because it's not, if you just look scene by scene, it's not necessarily the most terrifying movie. Like I said, it's pretty low in like the amount of violence that's actually on screen.
Yep.
Some of the like I think most of the characters are great. Some of them aren't as prevalent throughout the movie, so we don't get as
Right.
invested in them. But like every part of the world and the characters that we do see gets you so engrossed in it that everything the movie does just works.
If anyone's watching this and you haven't, for whatever reason, seen the original Alien movie, do yourself a favor, set aside like 2 hours and 30 minutes or whatever it is, go watch it.
Hmm.
Because if you're a sci-fi buff, if you're a horror buff, if you just like the idea of aliens in general, like it's really well done. It does a lot, and if you're a movie buff, watch it, because God, everything that I think everything that movie and then Star Wars did to really like pioneer this this new generation of effects,
Mhm.
both practical and some special. Like, man, those movies just hit everything out of the park.
Yeah. I also one thing that I kind of sucks, not about Alien, but like it makes Alien better is that like it is so rare we get sci-fi horror, especially that
That is
feels like
true.
Alien. That's like a lot of times we'll get something where it's like it's horror and it's a robot that's doing it, but it's like still normal. Like it feels it's not like its own world like an
Right.
Alien is, or like one example we do have is like Event Horizon is like another
Yep.
good sci-fi horror movie that we get. It's just like so rare we actually get them. And but it is great we have these like amazing ones to get to keep watching at least while waiting
Yeah.
for like whatever the new Alien series or some other new thing. But yeah, that always bums me out. It's just like I want to watch new sci-fi horror. Yeah, I guess it's just too expensive. I guess is the main thing.
Yeah.
A
You
lot of
gotta
money to put
have.
into horror.
Yeah, you gotta have quite the budget, I think, in order to
Hmm.
pull off just about anything that's trying to deal with sci-fi. Because especially, like we've been talking about effects, practical versus special. Man, you gotta be on your game in
Hmm.
order to like present futuristic sci-fi or even just like modern day sci-fi. Which I mean, science fiction is always going to be in the future. So, uh, but man, you just have to work so hard to make it to present it in a way that seems real, tangible,
Hmm.
and then that doesn't look like you green screens
Yeah.
anything and everything.
Hmm.
So did you ever see the movie? I think it's just called Life with Jake
I've
Gyllenhaal
heard
and
about it, but I haven't seen it yet. I've been
okay.
recommended it a couple times.
It's pretty good. It's up there in the sci-fi horror range. It's not alien caliber. I would say it's probably in the like Prometheus
Hmm.
kind of caliber of movies. It's got a really neat concept. It executes it relatively well. The special effects are pretty good.
Hmm.
It's not super scary. It plays almost more on like the thing and to some degree. Like there's this thing. It's I guess it's like a good mix of the thing and Alien, I guess. But anyway, it's good. It's for a modern-ish day sci-fi horror film, I think it does pretty good.
Hmm.
And actually, God, now that I mentioned the thing, that's a cool movie. That's
Yeah, that is one I think we'll be covering sometime soon. I have somebody's wanting to
nice.
cover it. So yeah, that's definitely one. I figured that one would go quick. But yeah, that's one I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to talking about too. But
Yeah. I mean, God, just another good like. I mean, yeah. I guess I don't know if you'd call it sci-fi horror. I
I
kind
mean,
of
I
is.
think
It's
once
alien.
like yeah, when the aliens are because you can have like sort of high, like I would say Alien is more like high science fiction where it's like every part of it is science fiction. Like they're in
Yeah,
something that doesn't exist. The setting, everything about it is like sort of removed from what
from
we would
current
consider like
reality
yeah
or
normal life. And then you
yeah,
can have like you know like Terminator is most of the movie at least is sort of low sci-fi where it's just like there's a robot here in
sure,
regular
yep,
California or whatever or the thing where it's just like everything's normal except there's an alien
yeah,
where it can be like science fiction but yeah maybe not as futurist.
yeah. Yeah, no, the thing that's another cool movie.
Oh yeah.
I won't talk too much about that if you got it covered here soon. But
Oh yeah.
that movie. I do remember scared the living crap out of me the first time I ever watched it, and I didn't
Mm,
watch it until I was probably in my like late teens, early 20s,
yeah.
so 10, 12 years ago, and I still was just like I was like, man, how have I never seen this movie? And of course, I've almost all of my friends are really big horror movie fans.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm like the one friend who gets, the crap scared out of him at just about anything. So
Yeah.
I'm not as into them. I love horror movies. I think they're great. I just my poor little heart can only take so
Which
much,
there is a lot of like maybe a little off topic but I always think like it's sort of a misconception that horror movies have to try to scare you or they have to like because people be like oh that movie wasn't scary but it's like
Sure.
can still have
Was it
like the
unsettling
tropes.
though?
Yeah, it can have like the tropes
Yeah.
and themes of horror. It's like if you've got a character who their main motivation is don't die because there's a horror, trying to kill them, then it's like it's already in horror. Like even if there's no jump scares, especially, which I think a lot of that's like newer modern post like Insidious type.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's got to be jump scares. It's got to be jump scares. And it's like, you can have horror that's just creepy or,
Yeah.
just dark. Like most recent movie I covered was The Wailing, and that's like absolutely a horror movie. I don't think it ever even gets close to scaring me, or like I watched it with a friend and it doesn't ever scare, but it's like this movie is horror throughout the entire thing. Like this is a horror movie. So I think there's hope for the for the scared, the
Sure.
easily scared for some good horror.
Well, it's like also slightly off topic, but like Sinister was a movie that I didn't. I mean, I've watched that movie multiple times now, and there's one jump scare in like the entire movie, and it's all because of a loud noise. And once you know where that's at, it's like, okay, I know this is coming.
Mm-hmm.
But that movie is like, it's very unsettling. It's very creepy. It's, so, but yeah, I would consider that absolutely a horror film.
Yeah.
It's not a jump scare horror film. It's not It, the new It movies, scaring the crap out of me in a movie theater and
Yeah.
me jumping out of my seat, everyone, including
Yep.
my girlfriend, laughing at me, but yeah, no, I agree. I do think horror can be horror. And I guess it kind of just boils down to like, is it horrific? Yes, that is. And it could be, I see some people always try and like lump suspense and thriller into horror. And I don't think that's always, I would say 99% of the time or 90% of the time, that's probably not the right way to do it. Cause a horror movie can be suspenseful, but I mean, most suspense movies aren't, super disturbing or super dark.
And they won't have like the same, necessarily like the same motivations for what is going on. Like there's definitely a lot of overlap where, which is like thrillers, horror movies, and like I think comedies also have this where they're still kind of structured to where it's like the whole purpose is to build tension and then you relieve it. And in horror it's usually through a scare. In a comedy, it's through the joke, the punchline, or through a thriller, it's like, okay, we've wrapped up this part. And then moving on to the next sort of clue or hint or whatever that we're getting. And so like, yeah, they don't. There's a lot of movies that are hints that aren't horror movies, and I think to some extent you want to have like at least some of the tropes of horror to really call it a horror movie. Yeah, I think it is very broad, and to some extent, doesn't really matter to argue about, but
yeah, I think there's been a handful of movies that I've watched where like I go in expecting a horror movie because it says horror, like in the genre, and you get a little bit more like you get a lot more suspense, or you get a lot more, you get that like they'll build up to something and then it like falls flat, like nothing happens, and you're kind of like, okay, well, this is more like a suspense movie then at that point, or this. I think my biggest thing. So one movie I watched with a buddy of mine was, I think it was just called The Empty Man. I didn't really enjoy it. Yeah, I think we watched it just on Netflix, but it was really cool in concept, extremely cool in concept. It kind of has this like cultish vibe later on, and then it has this weird like, it tries to pull a fast one on you that's like, what, not quite time travel-esque, but like one of those weird like paradoxes where they try and throw this really off curveball out of nowhere, and it just, in my opinion, kind of failed to execute. My buddy loved the crap out of it. He thought it was great, but I was just like, and there were a lot of these really cool moments where it would like start to build in this, you get this like this suspenseful or this like really intriguing, like, oh shit, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
And then it just like bam, switched scenes, and you're like, Wait, what? Like, and that for me is like an automatic. I hate that stuff
Yeah,
because you like you get that buildup, either scare the crap out of me or resolve the buildup, but don't just cut to another scene and call it good. I
yeah.
can't stand it. That it
I
drives me up a wall when that happens.
I think it's I sort of had this thought that where because I kind of watch a lot of movies that do this like something similar where they start out with this really interesting premise that just like as soon as you read it you're kind of pulled in, and then they don't necessarily like pay it off. And it's like
Yeah,
I think it's way easier to ask like, it's sort of like you could make a riddle that someone tries to solve for like 2 hours and can't get it pretty
yeah,
easily, even though you don't know what you're talking about. But if you don't have a good answer for it, then it's just like, oh, it's gone. Like it's so much
yeah,
easier,
yeah.
I think, to get people like to make a mystery like this happened, but this, and you're like, well, how does that work? Like immediately your brain is just like,
Sure.
okay, how does that work? Doesn't mean they have a good answer, but
Yeah,
they've got a question, and it's like it makes those sort of like, which I think those are the most disappointing movies where it's like you can see it in your head, you're like, okay, this is gonna be good, and then you feel it already, and then it's just like, no, nah,
yeah.
we didn't
Or
finish
like,
it, we didn't get there.
yeah, or like when they leave things so open-ended that it's to the user or to the viewer to interpret.
Hmm.
I don't I don't mind that. And that's how The Empty Man was. Like I literally like Googled the movie
Yeah.
afterwards and I was just like, someone please explain this to me. What did I miss? And
Hmm.
even the director of the movie in an interview was like, oh no, we left it open-ended because we want people to question which one of 5 or 6 things happened. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, but
See,
why? I want to watch a movie that has a conclusion, not sit
yeah,
there and be like,
I think
well,
you can definitely do open ending or ambiguous sort of like conclusions for things, but it has to be well done. I think it like
yeah,
really the big point or like the overall theme here is just like execution is everything. Like a concept isn't really going to get you. It's not going to actually carry your movie. You have to have like a good satisfying conclusion, or like you leave enough there. And The Wailing is another great example, the movie I just watched, where
yeah,
it is a very ambiguous and open-ended sort of movie, but it is so well crafted in it that you can like see all the like all of it is laid out in front of you for you to see, but it's still purposely kind of you could you come out of the movie with like 3 or 4 different ideas of why it happened like that. And so I think like making the events ambiguous usually sucks, where it's just like cut to black on something and it's just like, yo, what happened afterwards? You don't know. But like making the reason, like the why or the how ambiguous, I think can be just like getting people thinking about a movie afterwards and can make it more satisfying to rewatch. But like just like now we cut to black is, yeah, it's a good way to leave people unsatisfied.
yeah. So I don't know. It didn't grab me. Maybe it
Mhm.
grabs other people, but I'm definitely going to. I'm gonna find this movie because now you mentioned it a couple times, and I'm gonna
It's
watch
really
it.
good. It is very long. That's the one warning I'll give you. It's like two and a
Yeah,
half hours.
yeah. 2 hours 36. I'm seeing.
It's pretty long, but it's a slow burn, go in knowing that. But it's, yeah,
Okay.
it is very good. And you'll probably, I know I did, I've watched tons of horror movies and I still afterwards, I was like, all right, what happened in this movie at the end? I just
Yeah.
really, but it makes
Yeah.
it better. Like it's a movie I'm already looking forward to rewatch, even though it was really long and I hate long movies by
Oh,
default.
sure.
I'm just like, okay, I'm looking forward to rewatching that because now I have a whole new like perspective on what happened.
Sure.
But yeah,
Speaking of slow burns, before we
oh
jump over to the
yeah,
deck, did you ever watch the movie Annihilation with Natalie Portman?
that's another one I really need to watch because
Okay.
I've been recommended that one
Uh,
a lot too.
man, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Me personally, because it kind of did that same thing where like, especially like if you watch the trailer for that movie, it looks like it's gonna be this really dope epic like sci-fi adventure,
Hmm.
and it kind of doesn't turn into that. It turns into something
I've
that I was
I've
kind
heard
of
it's
like,
like Lovecraftian almost, where
yeah,
it's sort of I've heard it compared to what is it, Color Out of Space, if you're familiar with that.
oh no, I'm not.
Where it's sort of like this otherworldly thing. It's a Lovecraft story. It's been adapted. There's a Nicolas Cage movie of it. It's actually pretty good. But
Huh.
yeah, it's like this otherworldly sort of thing that is hard for humans to understand. That's what I've heard it compared to, at least.
Yeah, so Annihilation was one of those movies that for me, two and a half hours in, and then it kind of turns into this really very interesting ending for the last, but it's like a very slow ending. It's like
Yeah.
35, 40 minutes of just like, okay, is this gonna end yet?
Mm.
Is something gonna happen? And then it kind of just ends and you're like, what?
Yeah.
So anyway, otherwise, like the rest of the film, the first like hour and a half, hour 45 is really cool. And the
Mm.
concept is super dope. I think the special effects are really well done. It's just like that last bit, and they do the same thing. They throw this like weird curveball into it, and you're just like, that was unexpected.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm going into it thinking sci-fi action, and it kind of turns into this more like drama thriller.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, not quite my thing.
Yeah. Just generally, I think that, which I don't know if that's the case with that movie, but there is a lot of people want to throw in a twist in their movie, even though, like, I think
It doesn't need it.
a good twist should make the movie, the whole rest of the movie better. Like
Yeah.
everything up to this point should now be improved. Like a great example is Get Out, where
Yeah.
the twist, you now have new context for the entire film
Right.
when you rewatch it. But then like a bad twist is just like it makes things make less sense. It does like a great example of this is I actually think Us. Us is a movie I don't like as nearly as much as Get Out. Um,
Think I've seen that
that was
one.
Jordan Peele's next movie after Get Out, where
Oh,
the
yep,
other
yep, yep,
family
yep,
comes in. Where I feel
yep.
like the twist there actually kind of pulls the movie down for me, where it just leaves me questioning things, not in like a, oh, that means this now. It's just like, well, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it can make a movie just work less. I think twists in general, I think kind of avoid them unless you really know what you're doing, because
Yeah.
they can just like, I think they have the potential, like if your movie's like a 7 out of 10, it has potential to like put it up to a 9 or down to a 5, and you don't want to
Sure.
end up putting your like
On that.
your really good movie just suddenly it's just whatever at the very
Yeah.
end, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
10% Rotten Tomatoes.
yeah, just off of that.